Hello, and welcome to Learn It from a Layman. I am Carl Christensen, solo podcasting today. We do have our World War II series that we were going to do today. Matt's not well today, so we wasn't able to do that. So we are instead, and by we I mean me, going to be discussing something a little bit different than we have in the podcast in the past. So generally we do scientific principles, school subjects, stuff like that. And I'd like to take a little bit of the information that we've kind of worked on and podcasted on in the past and apply it to, I think, things that often are not viewed in a scientific way or not taken in a logical approach for a lot of people, which gives us a little bit of the division and difficulties that we see in society and politics around us. So this will not be a political podcast. This will not even be a opinion podcast, but just a mindset and an ability for the layman to take what you learn, scientific principle or other truth, and apply it in a way that is hopefully useful to the community and society at large. So let's talk a little bit, I guess, first about. And I live in the United States. I live in California, and if you live in the United States, there have been a number of events in the last few months and even over the last few years that have created no small amount of division and arguing. Now, this is also a historical issue throughout the history of mankind. There have always been issues that divide us and cause frustration, anger, infighting, war, all of those things. And I don't know if there's a solution for some of the recent issues, right? So there was a school shooting, a horrible and unspeakable tragedy recently in the United States, where I believe it was 21 or 22 people died, and then obviously the discussion becomes why does this happen? Specifically in the United States, it happens frequently, and what can we do about it? And I'm not here to give you my opinion because I still don't want this to be an opinion podcast. Those are a dime a dozen, and I'm not. I'm not an influencer. I'm not any of those things. So I'd like to more discuss what you can do as a layman. Maybe you're not a layman. Maybe you're an incredibly intelligent, and not all laymen aren't intelligent, incredibly educated and involved and motivated and or connected person. But regardless of who you are and where you are, I'd like to take a minute to discuss, I guess, the basics of accountability. And that's what I'd like to really focus on just briefly is the idea that we can and should be accountable for our actions and then how those actions affect others, and even in relation to these hot button issues. So the Supreme Court's stance on abortion here recently that also made a huge deal. Racial issues, all those different things, right? As soon as we discuss any of those topics, we often run to our corners and start screaming at the other side. And unfortunately, it often becomes that in political. I took a political science class, and I know the reality of how these things work. But I do believe that starting at least some personal accountability and the ability that you have as a person to both find truth and then leverage that truth using your sphere of influence to create change and improvement is important to understand. So I think the first important thing that we need to know is what is true, right? And that's incredibly difficult. That's been at issue now. Once again, all of these issues are nothing new. I'm sure Plato and Socrates would have a lot to say on these subjects, and they weren't the first. But for us nowadays in modern times, we have an abundance of information, and so it's important that we get some axioms set up and that we base some of our moral judgments, some of our basic right and wrong on some axiomatic truths. And so you need to get to. I would put forward some very basic things. In the United States, we have the Declaration of Independence, which assures that all men are created equal, and that we have the right, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I believe those are things that we can go, and I don't say that those are the only axioms in life, but I do think that those are ones that I think most people across all civilizations can agree would be a wonderful starting point. And once again, I'm not talking about specific concepts yet and how to apply these to any particular political or opinion issue, but just the idea that if we can go based on some axiomatic truths, we can better understand where we're coming from. Because I guarantee each one of those things I mentioned, gun rights and abortion and racial issues and all of those things, you have an opinion. If you're listening to me, either even if you're young, your parents have told you something, or maybe you've had experiences in your life that have led you one way or another, and experiences are incredibly valuable. But the basics of accountability would, I think, first require us to look at things in a more scientific and a more rule-based way, I guess, and experiences can be brought in to bear in a way in the way that we understand and apply the axioms to the problem. But we need to get, once again, these. An axiom is just a basic truth, right? So life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, all men are created equal, and we need to go based on those assumptions. Now, obviously, you can bring in religious questions. We're not going to bring in religious questions. So this is another thing that, once again, people run to their corners and have. So let's, once again, when analyzing any particular issue, go based on some axiomatic truths. So let's look at, once I have those set up, then I can start analyzing why I think about a particular way, a particular subject in a particular way, and how does that relate to these truths, and how does that look, and then I can start analyzing outside of myself. But I need to understand myself and where I'm coming from first as well. So after setting up the axioms, then it's understanding yourself. So that'd be the second step, right? So looking, for example, gun control, this big issue that's recently, in the last 2 days, been all over the news. I have a particular idea, set of facts, set of experiences, right? But once again, go from these axioms: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. What are we? What is the current state of events? What is the way I'm perceiving them? How is that related to these truths? And can I better understand where I'm coming from and why I have particular feelings? And that will better just frame my position for me. So I grew up in an area where there were guns. I mean, I live in the United States. There are guns all over the place. I'm not personally a gun owner, but I know a lot of gun owners. So I have experiences with guns. And so I have all that informing me on, the people that I run into, but then I have these events that I see in the news that, as of yet, have not personally touched my life, but I can and do feel extreme empathy with the idea that children are gunned down in a classroom. That is unspeakably demonic and devastatingly tragic. It is something that I think everyone can get a gut level reaction, and that's gut level reactions I think are important. They move us, but I do believe that, once again, we need to analyze. So based on some axioms, and based on where I'm coming from, I now understand, okay, well, I think that there's probably more that can be done about gun control in the United States. And then I need to figure out, well, what needs to be done. And that's, once again, that's this ability that take all of this information that we've discussed in the podcast over the last 3.5 years and become a well-educated person. There's a lot of nuance to life. Now, some of these issues I think are pretty clear-cut as to what needs to happen and what could happen. But understanding the nuance doesn't necessarily change your opinion, but it does help you inform how to move forward with a particular set of ideas or changes that you want to see. Because political science and the social environment that you live in are their realities. And so, we're not Don Quixote, we're not tilting at windmills here. the idea that there need to be changes in gun control and or racial issues or abortion issues, all of those things. Like I said, you can have whatever opinion on any of these political issues that you want, but understanding the nuance of how people perceive these experiences and then these axioms, I think, will make you a better person and better able to influence and make change in the world around you. So if I understand the axioms, I understand myself, and then I understand my environment, and that's the third part here. I think you're now pretty well tooled to go and start making changes to some degree, right? Once again, I am a podcast host for, I don't know, we have thousands of people that listen to me now. That's wonderful, and I've tried my life to inform myself well and prepare useful information for people, and obviously I've had a lot of help from all of my co-hosts that have given lots of different useful information. None of that we haven't discussed things like gun control or any of these political issues. Largely because, once again, I think that you need, as a layman, to have a basic level of humility and also a basic level of education and intelligence in order to be well tooled and well versed enough to get out there and make to say something that matters and that is correct. So I would like to invite everyone to take those three principles, axioms, personal understanding, and understanding your environment, very seriously. And each one of these individual matters. I think very frequently we just kind of groupthink our way to particular solutions, right? Family, clan, religion, friend group, whatever it is, and we don't analyze our own position and understand how our position might be influenced by the things that we're surrounded by. Once again, going all the way back to the first step, the axioms, I think that there are truths and particular ways that these things should be done independent of all of environment and your own personal experiences. But the reality of life is that you need to understand all of that in order to affect change. So let's take an example of gun control again with affecting change. Now, if you understand the United States government, you understand that it is kind of built for inaction. It is really systematically set up to be ineffective. And in some ways that's great. And in some ways it's not. And but knowing that, if you don't know that, if you haven't taken the basics in American government or something like that, or that's in our country, and I know there are people that listen to our podcast in the UK and India and Australia and Germany, and all of these governments might be more or less capable of enacting swift change. I don't think any government is really great at hitting a nail on the head when it comes to policies that are viewed, for whatever reason, in particular controversial lights. Right, often those are tilted more towards people that are viewed on the extremes. Now, once again, a timeout from extremes. An axiom is extreme, right? A basic fundamental truth, if held in isolation, is an extreme, right? That we're talking about a ground truth all by itself, and so extremes are not bad, right? We need to have axioms. You need to have basic fundamental truths that you adhere to. But once again, then the nuance comes in, and that's where a lot of people that are viewed as extreme in any political spectrum or particular issue, they don't see the nuance as much. Now, in some cases, like when people are dying or particular individuals are being held captive or enslaved, there's no nuance, right? Go 100 years ago, and if I'm discussing slavery or Jim Crow laws in the United States, I sound like I'm a slavery apologist or something like that. And that's so it's important once again to the first two steps of understanding the axiom and understanding where you're coming from. Hopefully, those are the most important steps before you get to trying to say, okay, in what environment I am, because hopefully, if you truly looked at the axiom of all men are created equal, and I live in a society where maybe race is viewed as there is a superior race, there's a hierarchy, whatever. Then you can say, okay, well, the environment, that last step of understanding nuance, can help me understand about how to improve it, but it can't change. It can't change those first two. Because I understand where I'm coming from, I understand what position I'm in, and I also understand that axiom. But Martin Luther King understood the need to involve more people and how to make meaningful change and things like that. So even though he knew those axiomatic truths and was, I'm sure, viewed by a lot of it as an extremist, he understood at least enough of the environment and how to manipulate that environment that he wasn't just tilting at a windmill. He actually made meaningful change and became a civil rights leader that did a lot of good in the United States. So. Um, Being on one of the extremes isn't necessarily a bad thing in particular areas, in as much as you have gone well into those first two steps of understanding where you're coming from and the axiom of that you're built on, because it is often the case that someone else on the other extreme is also doing something that they believe is fundamentally true and right. Right. So if I'm axiomatically and individually well set and saying I think guns should be outlawed, someone on the other side is saying, well, I think that this is axiomatically a right for someone to defend themselves, right? And so then if you that's where that third step of understanding the environment and interaction between people becomes very important. And okay, so now I've got two people that are on the extremes. What do I do to move move a particular idea or set of changes I'd like to see along, despite or hopefully with someone else that might not see and understand things in the way that I do, um, and and do so in a peaceful way, right? Once again, we need to look back into history of people that do these things very well, like Gandhi, right? Mahatma Gandhi was wonderful understanding axiomatic truths, understanding where his set of experiences, but also then saying, okay, I know what needs to change. I know, and I know how to do this non-violently. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, these are people that that did this right, and I think it's important to understand that, and understand that all these things that Gandhi was well educated, Martin Luther King obviously well educated. So it is important that you educate yourself and that you don't give don't give ground on education, because that is important, and understanding where you lack it will better also help you understand the way that you can actually make meaningful changes. So a good sense of, like I said, humility and self-awareness is important in understanding how to make these changes. Now, I guess the last and final step, once we understand axioms, we understand our individual place and the environment, is this idea of I still have accountability, right? We can't do paralysis by analysis. You can't think yourself out of the fact that you're here, you have agency, things around you are influenced by you, whether or not you want them to be. And so you need to move and you need to act and you have accountability. And these are all steps of being a good and a responsible and accountable person. And then that last step is actually be accountable, do something, hold yourself accountable. And there are lots of different ways to get involved in society. I think there are better and worse ways to get involved in society. I believe in education. I believe in helping and building people up, empowering people. But that it is very important that we understand what that means and does not mean. Right? It doesn't mean that we go out and start riots. It doesn't mean that we go and yell at our friends or our enemies. We don't jump on the on Facebook or Twitter or social media of any variety and start screaming, into the void. I think there's a lot more constructive things that you can do. Start with your own community, right? Start with your city. That's what I said. The U.S. government is set up to kind of grind, and sometimes it'll move forward, and sometimes you might feel it moves back. Uh, and do what you can to help in the ways that you feel like you can. But the local, where the community you live in, the city, the county, then the state, all of those things are a little bit more influenced by you than the government. Obviously, you're just a bigger percentage. You can influence more of the things directly around you. So unless you have a following of hundreds of thousands of people across the country or across the world, and really can move the needle in that way, um, you know, be realistic with yourself. And honestly, even those that really do have a big following, I think sometimes people have good intentions, but that start spouting off ideas that maybe locally do work for you, but don't work across the globe. And that's internationalism is great. I'm grateful for all of the people that I've met across, as I've met traveled the world, and all the insights I've seen. The reality is that society is, you spend 99% of your life in interaction with just the people around you. Not, none of us are, well, very few of us travel the world all the time. So make the changes locally. Go get involved in your city government, in your county, and in your state, because those are set up to be less rigid, and I think that's a good thing. I think that the government at the national level is rigid by design, and I think generally it's a good thing. However, governments, city and state governments are less so, and so move them, right. You have a bigger voice in that way, so make the change there. If you're looking for a way to really meaningfully move forward, take a city council meeting in, and go say something there that you feel needs to be said, because the reality is you can really make a big change in that way, right? For example, drugs, marijuana is legal in California, right? And I've been and live in areas where they have marijuana shops and all those types of things. And the community I live in, it's a very family-based community, and they didn't want marijuana, you know, distribution areas and billboards and all those other types of advertisements that would bring a particular clientele to this area. And so the city has said, no, we're not doing that. And that's something I appreciate. I have 5 children, and so I'd rather not have that particular influence on my children right now. Now, if you live in a different community and your community is young single adults, and you're like, well, that's kind of the scene, then that's why we have these different rules for different communities, and the communities can interact without being spiteful of each other. I think that's once again, I guess, as I wrap up the podcast here, it's important, like I said, to understand your axiom, to understand who you are, where you come from, the experiences that you have that inform how you view these axioms and these experiences. Understand your environment. Understand, get a good broad base across a lot of different fields. I think that will make you a better a capable person in enacting change, and also understanding axioms and how they should be applied. And then hold yourself accountable, make change, do it in a way that is lasting and meaningful, and that can be different for different people. But also be patient with other people and help inform them. You're going to run into some people that aren't worth your time, so don't give them your time. Don't start screaming about it on Facebook or Twitter, or don't give people that have not yet done these steps. Don't give them your time. You have enabled yourself, so move forward, and always be willing, though, to take a half step back, to reassess and be humble, and be open to learn, because maybe you are wrong. Maybe something someone says in the future is a new truth, a new field, a new not even a new experience. Because, like I said, some of these things shouldn't be necessarily free to be influenced by experience per se, but maybe a truth that you hadn't really considered. Maybe there's a particular branch of science that you hadn't had your eyes open to yet, and instead of just jumping on your team and screaming red or blue or whatever it might be more scientific, be more dispassionate about it, and think, okay, well, what is the reality here, independent of what my experiences, and then apply your experiences, and then apply environment, and move up that chain, and then say, okay, well, now that I re-understand, I've reanalyzed, I can step forward again. I can be back in the limelight. I understand where I'm coming from. I understand why that was viewed in this way, and now I can help make a change again. So, when it comes to any of these issues, I do encourage you to become well informed and then to move forward. So, if you want more gun control and to stop school shootings, and you think that's the way to do it, inform yourself, understand what that looks like, and why people are opposed to that, and if they're just wrong, then they're wrong, right? And but understand why they're wrong, and understand the way that you can kind of get around particular concerns and issues that might otherwise be blocking people. And like I said, you might not convince everyone, but you don't need to. In the government of democracy, so we're a democratic republic in the United States. We don't vote for laws directly. Generally, we vote for people that vote for laws. So you have to be good at these to analyze the people that you're voting for as well. But influence those people. Send some emails, call people, say this is what you should be doing and this is why. And I do believe that a good and well versed electorate is incredibly important. So keep listening to our podcasts. I hope that you've listened to all the physics ones, all the teaching ones, all the language ones, because all of those I think are important. Physics doesn't directly influence abortion policy or gun control policy, but it does help you understand that there are axioms in life, and so it's not just political science; it's also the reality of truth. And so, never be dissuaded that there is a axiomatic truth, and act on it, but do so in a useful way. So I hope this layman explanation, coming from your resident layman here, has helped you understand where and hopefully better enabled you to move forward in these things that you feel strongly about, and better able to understand why you feel strongly. So take that time. It's something that I do. Like I said, I'm not. This isn't an opinion podcast. I'm not going to give you about my opinion about any of those things that I mentioned. Those are hot button issues, and you're going to have particular things that you believe. And if we sat down together, I'd love to discuss those things with you. But in lieu of that, I'll just give you the steps that I go through to make my positions and help me inform myself on why particular actions are necessary, and hope that you can do the same. So let's reach out and make changes, and try to be a better citizen. So in the meantime, please keep listening to our podcast. Follow us on Spotify, and we'll be back again soon with our history podcast.